This is Commissioner Reed. I'm filling in for Commissioner Willie today, who is remote and online with us. And to get us started, I'll just give some comments about how we run our meeting. Welcome to our, we're April 17th, 2024 Board of County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. Paper copies of the agenda are available for those who are here in person, and the full packet is available on our website. First, we will have our consent agenda, followed by general public comment. We welcome general public comment for addressing issues that are not on today's agenda, but otherwise related to county business. Given our limited time and the need to have an orderly and efficient meeting, we apply certain rules regarding public comments. We will do our best to enforce these rules consistently and without regard to the point of view expressed by the speaker. Each speaker will be limited to a total of 3 minutes of speaking time. However, we will accept public comment of any length in writing. Individual speakers may not donate used time to other speakers. All comments must address topics within the jurisdiction of the County Commission. And we reserve the right to mute and remove any speaker whose comments are threatening, aggressively hostile, or belligerent. Campaigning for public office during public comment period is not allowed. Please give your full name and address for our meeting minutes and address your comments to the commission directly. Please also know that the comments received by the commission during our meetings do not necessarily represent the views of Douglas County government, but we value the input. We don't usually respond to general public comment on the spot, but if you leave your contact information with county staff, we will try and get specific questions answered later. After that, we will move on to our regular agenda. For each action item, we will hear from staff or an applicant, followed by questions from the commission, and then open that item up for public comment relevant to that item. Once public comment is closed for each item, we will bring it back to the commission for further discussion and a vote. Lastly, a recording of this meeting will be available on the county's YouTube page and website. To get us started this evening, we've got a couple of proclamations, and our first one is for Senior Volunteer Appreciation Day, and Commissioner Kelly's going to read that, and then we invite anybody who's here to give more information to us to come up to the mic or unmute online.
Okay, this is a proclamation for Senior Volunteer Appreciation Day 2024, which is April 17th, 2024. Whereas volunteers make an important impact on the capacity and success of Douglas County's many social service and nonprofit organizations. And whereas as many as 30% of all people 65 and older volunteer throughout our community, and whereas these senior volunteers give their time, their talents, and their treasures, and whereas without the impact of these seniors, many organizations would struggle to fulfill their service missions. And whereas generational knowledge, experience, and histories not otherwise accessible are shared with those striving to make a better future. And whereas many senior volunteers are heard saying that they do this in order to give back to their community. And whereas these hours of volunteer service represent a level of generosity and compassion which the rest of the community can emulate, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Douglas County, Kansas hereby proclaim the week of April 17th, 2024 as Senior Volunteer Appreciation Day. We encourage all residents and visitors to express their gratitude for the impact of the hours and service given by senior volunteers throughout Douglas County. And I believe I saw Megan Poindexter is here. If you'd like to make any comments, we'd like to welcome you up.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Megan Poindexter. I'm the Executive Director for the Senior Resource Center for Douglas County, and we really appreciate the opportunity to recognize not just senior volunteers, but all volunteers. But of course, as the Senior Resource Center, we are particularly passionate about our senior volunteers. So this is an agreement amongst a lot of organizations throughout Douglas County who came together to put together this proposed proclamation out of the gratitude that we all feel for the impact made. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Megan. We only have 2 of the 3 signatures today. Would you like the proclamation, or would you like to follow up with Robin later after she's able to get Commissioner Willie's signature? It's up to you.
Could I take it now and then I'll bring it back?
Absolutely.
And tomorrow I'd like to.
Totally your choice. Thank you for being here, Megan. We have another proclamation for National Telecommunications Week. I believe Commissioner Willie is prepared to read that one for us. I'll turn it over to you.
I would like to. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Vice Chair. So this is a proclamation for National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, April 14th through 20th, 2024. Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that requires sheriff, police, fire, or emergency medical services, and whereas an emergency occurs, the prompt response of law enforcement, firefighters, and paramedics is critical to the protection of life and preservation of property. And whereas the safety of our deputies, police officers, and firefighters is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who telephone the Douglas County Emergency Communications Center, and whereas public safety dispatchers are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services, and whereas public safety dispatchers are the single vital link for our police officers and firefighters by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them information, and ensuring their safety, and whereas the public safety dispatchers of the Douglas County Emergency Communicators Center has contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of fires, and treatment of patients. And whereas each dispatcher has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism during the performance of their job in the past year. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Douglas County, Kansas hereby proclaim the week of April 14th to the 20th, 2024 as National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, and joins in honoring the men and women whose diligence and professionalism keep our country, our county, and our citizens safe, adopted the 17th day of April, 2024.
Thank you, Commissioner. Tony and Sonia, would you like to come up and share some more information, or anybody else who you've brought with you?
Thank you, Commissioners. It is my distinct honor to represent the telecommunicators here in Douglas County. To have this opportunity to celebrate the things that they do, the tireless work that they provide, and the amazing service that they do on a weekly basis is humbling at times. In 2023, our telecommunicators took over 100,000 administrative calls and 40,000 911 calls, and they answered all of those calls within 10 seconds, which is well above the national standard. I can sit here and expound upon the great work that our people do on a day in and day out basis for a long time, but I thought it would be more appropriate to actually hear from our staff. And if you allow me to turn that over to them, I would like to do that at this time. I want to introduce Bailey Nyatat and Jeremy Kohler. Jeremy Kohler is an assistant supervisor with the Douglas County Emergency Communications Center. He's also the 2023 Supervisor of the Year. And Bailey is the newly promoted CO2, and she's also the Telecommunicator of the Year for 2023. And I'd like to turn it over to them. They can speak a few words.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Douglas County Commission, good evening. My name is Jeremy Kohler, Assistant Shift Supervisor, and this is Bailey Nyatat, Communications Officer 2 for the Douglas County Emergency Communications Center. We're here today to tell you a little bit about what we do and the importance of our center for the lives of Douglas County residents and visitors. People always ask me, how do you handle people calling you all day in need of help? What I always think about is a Garth Brooks song I heard as a child. I was never really much of a country music fan. I'm still not, but the one song of his really left an impression on me that remains to this day. In the wake of the Oklahoma City bombing, he wrote, "It's not the world that I'm changing. I do this so that this world will know it will not change me." When someone calls 911 or the non-emergency number, you key up on your radio, you'll reach us, the telecommunications specialists of the ECC. We staff the ECC every day, handling calls both mundane and extraordinary. We support more than 4 different law enforcement agencies, 6 different fire departments, and process, triage, and properly disseminate all of the emergency and non-emergency calls that come in. We quickly gather all of the necessary information on calls to send out to law enforcement, fire, and medical crews. We actively track and oversee officer locations and statuses, send emergency and non-emergency backup, control the Douglas County radio system, research various databases to fulfill informational requests like driver's license checks, vehicle registrations, facilitate tow services, research premise and suspect information, confirm warrants, monitor dangerous situations to maintain first responder safety, We request aircraft for trauma incidents, coordinate with various other agencies, and ensure the maximum amount of assistance shows up when and where it's needed, even across jurisdictional boundaries. We do all of this while maintaining the highest degree of accuracy, knowing that every keystroke can affect response times, responder and public safety, understanding, and civil liberties. When there are noise complaints, people are ill, or they want a burn permit, they call us. When they want to report parking violations or locate a towed vehicle, they call us. When there are stray animals, they call us. When they want to find out the name of the officer who was involved with that thing that happened at one place that one time, they call us. When people do call us for an emergency, however, they'll find us there day or night, calm, ready, professional, always ready and willing to serve. We know that when the people of this county call us on their worst day, they'll find us at their best. Maintaining this level of vigilance and professionalism takes its toll. Dispatchers nationwide average only 3 to 5 years at this position. Dealing with the desperate, urgent need of others, the rapid change from mundane to life or death struggle leaves its mark on us. We do our best every day to bear not only the burden of aiding those in need, but also the emotional burdens of dealing with these crises. We hear the last gasps of the dying and the first cries of the newborn. We hear a mother's desperate plea for help and a father break down in tears when aid arrives. We hear the click of a gun when a young man takes his life and the laughter of a child who just found his dog. We will take a dozen 911 calls for the same houseless subject taking a nap in a flower bed and a single call for someone getting shot. We do all of this while working long 12-hour shifts with limited breaks or opportunities to leave our consoles, working overtime to maintain and ensure minimum staffing. But why? For the same reason that the teams we support in law enforcement, firefighting, and medical services. It needs to be done, and since we can do it, we must. We're proud of the work we do with our team and with our partners and other agencies. We're calling on you tonight to recognize my fellow dispatchers for the incredible work they put in, often unseen and unremarked, save for this 1 week a year. There's an old proverb that states, "A society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they may never sit." The work we do as dispatchers is endless, and we know that it is work that will never truly feel done to us. None of us would do this work for praise or for the reward of a shade tree, but it would be nice if, from time to time, you might help us with a little water and sunshine. Thank you.
Thank you all. We really appreciate you being here and appreciate your work immensely, and that it is a 24-hour constant job. So similar question as earlier for Megan, would you like your proclamation now with 2 signatures, or would you like to get it from Robin later with 3? Okay. All right, Robin, I'll get that to you. And thank you all again for being here and for the work you do, and I hope you have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you.
All right. That brings us to our consent agenda. Commissioners, are there any items that you would like to pull for further comment?
Commissioner
Questions?
Kelly, no.
Okay, seeing 2 no's, I'll ask if there's anybody in the public who would like to pull anything from the consent agenda.
Item 2.3, please.
Item 2.3. Anybody else? Anybody raise their hand online, Sarah? I think I forgot to make that mention earlier, so just in case anybody's listening online for future public comment, please make sure to raise your hand so staff can see that. All right, ready for a motion otherwise?
Motion to approve the consent agenda items 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Item 2.3. Sarah, do we have anybody here from the sheriff's office?
No. It's a routine item that we do every year or as needed by the sheriff's office at the recommendation of the sheriff's office.
Okay, thank you. Michael, if you would like to come provide comment about your reason.
Here under provide the commission some information that they may not be aware of or they may already be aware of and help and cover it up. Before we continue to spend any more money on sheriff vehicles, I think we need to look into some of the reasons we're having to replace them. Jay Armbrister and Philip Weinmester both know what I'm referring to. And so you can visit with them about what I'm referring to. And we're trying to get some people to actually be transparent in this county. And let's not cover up crimes and other things like that. So if we could have you guys look into why we're having to replace some vehicles and talk specifically to Jay Armbrister and Phil Weinmaster in references to emails that I've had with them, that would be thankful. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Since this item has been pulled, it is eligible for further public comment. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to provide any other comments? Okay, seeing none, double check for virtual hands. All right, we'll close public comment on this. Ask if commissioners have anything further to say or would like to make a motion.
Make a motion to approve emergency vehicle permit for Michael Hirschman, Fire District 2.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. That brings our consent agenda to a close. Now is the time for general public comment. A reminder that this is a time for public comment about items that are not on today's agenda, but otherwise related to county business. And your comments are to be directed to the county commission. I don't think we had a sign-up sheet available today, but is there anybody in the audience who would like to provide general public comment?
Alrighty. A few weeks ago, I came here saying that Commissioner Patrick Kelly is a giant pussy because he refused to meet with a constituent due to Patrick saying he didn't feel safe because of the tone and words that the constituent used while speaking here during general public comment. Keep in mind, Patrick's female colleague, Sarah Plinsky there, has met individually with that same colleague. There was a YouTube video made about Patrick's conversation, and in the video, Patrick says, like a giant beta, that his feelings were being invalidated by the constituent. So last time I spoke here, I read some of the comments from the YouTube video, and there have been some additional comments on that, so I wanted to read those new comments here as well. To be clear, this isn't the only instance of Patrick Kelly outing himself as a giant pussy. He did this when he forced 2-year-old children to wear masks during COVID. And he also shows it in his job as Director of Curriculum and Instruction for USD 497, where he developed and
Justin, I'm
implemented
going to
the
ask
gender
you to
identity
speak
and
about
sexual development.
items specific to the county commission.
This is about his character, and the character of a commissioner is germane to the county business, so thank you. And he also shows it in his job as Director of Curriculum and Instruction for USD 497, where he developed and implemented the gender identity and sexual development curriculum, where adults talk to kids beginning at age 5 about sexual development, gender identity, and the role society has on genders. So let's go ahead and read some more of those YouTube comments. First one here. Yes, Patrick, you are less of a person. You are far, far below being a real man. Another one here. Another coward scared of accountability. This guy sounds like an absolute wimp. Grow up and be a man.
You are not speaking about items that are specific to the business of the county commission.
It's about his character.
You are attacking his character,
but
and
it's
this is your last
his
warning
character.
to talk about items that are specific to the county commission.
Can you explain to me how his character isn't germane to the business of the county?
It's not the business of
His
the county
character,
commission.
a commissioner's character has nothing to do with the commission? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not going to go back and forth with you, Justin. I've said what I said.
Our government has become cowards, and it makes me ashamed of mankind. What a cowardly man that man is. This lady here says, I have more balls than Patrick too.
Please mute the mic, Sarah. Justin, you're welcome to stay with us for the meeting, but your public comment time is over. Thank you. You've been muted. Your public comment time is over. Thank you.
That's what I'm saying. You're muting me additional times when you already muted me is what I'm saying.
Justin, your public comment has ended. You're welcome to stay with us for the rest of the meeting. Is there anybody else here who would like to provide public comment?
Why can't you guys just sit and listen for 3 minutes? Why do you create cases? I came here to talk about something else, but why? And I notice now that you're not going to have police arrested because you've already gone over that line. So now he's just muted, which is completely under your control and nothing anybody can do about it. Guys, we don't have to agree with him. You don't have to like what he says. But just as I said to Brad Finkeldye recently, our politics can be dirty, and they can be a hell of a lot more dirty than what they are right now. We rise out of flames in this town. Do you guys even understand the history of what that means and the discourse that occurred and the people's lives that were given in defense of that? But you guys get your feelings hurt by 3 minutes of public speech. Why? Is it really worth it? Because it's more than likely that he's going to go back to his lawyer with that video and file another lawsuit on you dumbasses. Really? And it's our money. Why would you do that? That's all I got tonight.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else here in the audience who would like to provide general public comment? Okay, seeing none, check for any virtual hands that have been raised. Okay, with that, general public comment has concluded, and we will move on to regular agenda item 4.1. And I believe Caitlin will introduce this item to us.
Hi, good evening, County Commissioners. I'm really excited to be here today to present the Heritage Conservation Council's recommendations for the 2024 Natural and Cultural Heritage Grant Program. This is an annual program that started in 2011, and so I'm here to present the recommendations. They're all the 11 projects that were recommended for funding this year are listed out in the memo that I submitted in the agenda, and I stand for any questions you have about those recommendations, and yeah.
Thank you, Caitlin. I'm going to turn to Commissioner Willie online first, see if you have any questions you'd like to ask.
I don't have any initial questions. I really enjoyed reading the projects, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness that goes into not only the applications that come to us, but I know that you have a great team that looks these over to provide these recommendations. So I'm curious to hear what other commissioners might have to say.
Commissioner Kill, any questions?
Caitlin, thank you for the really nice packet. I really enjoyed reading the descriptions for each grant. I know that each grant, we're just getting a very small piece of it here, and I've done grant review before, but I'd love to hear maybe just a little bit of what caused some of them to rise to the top and maybe those that weren't funded. Sometimes when we read the descriptions, I think like, wow, this looks pretty similar. And without calling any single grant out, could you give us just a little bit of what the committee saw as those that rose to the top versus those who weren't funded?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And like you said, I wish I could include every single application in there, but that would get lengthy quick. Back in December, I came to you all approved the process of how we run this program. And so with that, we introduced some new criteria that the grants are now scored on. We basically kept the essence, but simplified them a whole lot. And we had a lot of success this year in those scores being used as a pretty strong weight in the process. Those scores don't equal the recommendations, but they help inform the council. We introduced a new criteria this year that was specifically focused on equity, so that helped raise up some projects that may have scored a bit lower in the past, and none of the categories are weighted this year, so they're all taken in equal consideration. So generally, those scores helped inform the discussion. A lot of the projects that rose to the top this year were a lot of collaborative projects that involved multiple stakeholders, and were projects that had the greatest amount of success. This year we had 18 applications in total that totaled over $490,000 in requests. So it was a hard process to sort through those. I think the applications that maybe weren't recommended for funding were maybe at their earlier stages, so there was less confidence potentially potentially in the council that, the feasibility of the project might not have been as strong as some of the others. So I think the strength of the feasibility of the projects that were recommended for funding, those ones rose to the top. Another thing we kept in mind was the geographic diversity. So, there are some projects, tried to maintain projects funded throughout the county. And yeah, so really, I was really proud of how the criteria worked. I think we'll do a couple bit more tweaks in the next season, but was really proud of how the scores correlated with the projects that were recommended for funding. They were a lot more useful this year.
And I
Yeah.
ask something real quick, Commissioner Willie. So I know some of the applications came under kind of open space and some came under the traditional kind of program there. How do you differentiate between those two? Did the applicants decide which category they came into? Because I really love rural cemeteries. I'm glad to see some of our cemeteries show up here, a couple really fun ones. Maybe that's not the right thing to say about cemeteries, but I enjoy the history that we have there. But to me, those could also count as open space. I mean, those are places of public access and outdoor and history. So I'm just curious how that gets differentiated.
Yeah, that's a great consideration. And so how it worked this year with this grant cycle, those open space dollars are federal funds, so ARPA funds, so one-time funds. And so there was a greater capacity that was needed for applicants in that pool. So you might have even noticed some natural, even more clearly adjacent to open space projects that were in the general pool. That was because they didn't have sufficient capacity to administer those federal funds. I think that's a strength of our county dollars, as we don't have as many burdens there for smaller organizations. But beside the point, the open space funds this year were really targeted toward specifically land conservation type projects and educational projects that related to those. And so that's what we zeroed in on. In the future, thinking of open space and open space program, if there ever is an additional open space grant program in the future, I'm really excited now that we have the adopted open space plan. We'll be able to strengthen the potentially like the review criteria or the subject and theme of those future open space grants to be more in alignment with the open space plan. So we can integrate some of the pieces of the open space plan in a future program. I feel like I have a million ideas for how we can do that, but I'm excited to have the plan adopted now. That was another kind of trouble too, is this all started in January when we were still forming together the plan itself. And so I think any future open space would have stronger criteria and requirements that directly link where people should apply to.
I have a follow-up question, Commissioner Willie. Some of these programs, as I read through them, or these applications have kind of a natural community outreach that comes as part of it. And some of these maybe will need to, as a county or as the newsletter, as Heritage Conservation Council, kind of make those things known that they then become part of the public sphere. Do we have a plan for that, or is that already kind of included in some of the larger portions of the application that we're not seeing?
That is a piece, all awardees, once they move through the application process and they have their grant awards, they submit quarterly reports to myself, and I share those with the HCC. And so that's something I've been hoping to work on, is creating like a community calendar where I can store all those events. I forward them on as I can and in sort of chunks as those quarterly reports come along, but I think that's something we can definitely strengthen as the HCC itself and the work I do.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Caitlin, I just have one more question. This is Commissioner Reed. The folks who either didn't get funded at all or who only got partially funded, are you or anybody else on the HCC sort of working with them to identify other sources of funding and or sort of how to scale their project differently, since they've got some funding if they're unable to get to what their goal was? Can you just talk to me about how you're sort of navigating that with folks?
Yeah, so I think another strength of this program is it's fairly local and it's not super expansive, so everyone can work directly with me to find that out. So I've already sent, feedback notes from the review meetings to folks who requested it, and then I'm happy to meet with anyone who has any questions. And then specifically for the folks that are partially funded, I'll meet with them directly, individually, to make sure that we can refine the project scope to match the level of funding, or if they're unable to do that, we can work through, they always have the option to decline the funding as well, and we can work through that process if it comes up. But yeah, I hope to make myself as available as possible to aid in that process.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. Anybody in the audience that would like to make public comment about this item? All right, no takers. Anybody online, Sarah? Okay, we'll close public comment, bring this back for any further discussion and a motion. I agree with my fellow commissioners. There's some really cool projects, and I know we just got the very boiled down executive summary level. Yes, the grant reviewer in me wanted to see more about many of them. So anyway, it's exciting. I'm looking forward to hearing how a lot of them go and just seeing what the community's response to some of those projects are. So any further comments?
Okay, then I just want to say I really appreciate the work that you put into revising the rubric for how you looked at grants and taking some of our feedback on that, and also working with that committee. I think it's important to recognize this is a significant amount of funds that Douglas County is putting towards these things, and it's something I'm proud of. I think it's really great to see how much focus we have on a wide variety of projects this year, which is pretty exciting in my book. And Commissioner Willie doesn't have any comments. I'm glad to make a motion. Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the grant award recommendations as submitted by the Heritage Conservation Council for the 2024 Natural, Cultural, and Heritage Grant Program.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Caitlin. Have a good rest of your evening. Okay, with that, we move on to item 4.2. Our first planning item was, I see Sandy Dagan up, so I'll let you kick us off.
All these systems are just enough different. I'm gonna let you do it. Well, while Carl helps me out here, as you have probably guessed, I am Sandy Day, here on behalf of Mary Miller, who had a family emergency this afternoon. So I will do my very best to try and step into Mary's shoes a little bit. This is a site plan that is coming forward to you. Overall, the proposed physical changes to the site are fairly nominal. But this does include changes that include the addition of a new use. So the slides that you see here show the location of the property being on the west side of E1500 Road. It is an existing property with improvements. And then the slide on the right shows where this property is located with regard to the urban growth area, both for the city of Lawrence and then just the general urban growth area. So the property does encumber parts of Tier 2 and Tier 3, and there is a small part of the area where it is not included in any particular growth area, as you see on the map there. This is just a slide of the subject property. It includes 16 acres. It has gone through a process that combined that property through a corrections survey that was reviewed through county administrative staff. And then this is also a property that has had some history, and the intent is to address some of the compliance issues with this property. So that is part of that correction survey that was done previously. Okay. This is a slide of the property itself, and it highlights where part of the regulatory floodplain is. So this area would identify what is the floodway. The pink areas are floodway fringe, and then there is this area, which is highlighted in the staff report and on the site plan, area that has received some fill. When we are working in the floodplain, you have a couple of different steps that are appropriate to floodplain regulations. Those are administered through the county zoning staff. Fill is an activity, but then also if you have exterior storage, that requires a separate floodplain development permit, and those are reflected in the options for the applicant in the recommendations and the conditions of approval if this body chooses to approve the site plan. Otherwise, there are two new driveway approaches. This project went to the County Board of Zoning Appeals to allow for the use of gravel as a material. The gravel area has been extended, and the other item with this project is this extension or expansion of exterior storage. And then throughout the project, in the staff report, Mary does a pretty detailed review of the compliance requirements for screening, compliance with site plan design standards, parking, accessibility design, parking spaces, and those kinds of topics. This is a slide of the property as we see it today. You can see the two drives here on either end. You can't see the approach, but you get I think a good feel of the bulk of the property. The property is zoned for light industrial, so the existing uses and the proposed use would both fit within that category as described in the staff report. Another zoning district that is applicable to this property because of the proximity to the Lawrence Memorial Airport, municipal airport, and because we're not proposing structural height, the project did not have to have any additional regulatory review, but we are obligated to assess that for any project that comes forward that is within any of those air approach zones. And then what you see on the right-hand slide of this image is the land use. So everything highlighted in yellow is generally classified as residential. It is interesting that the northern portion of the subject property that's highlighted in the teal color is identified as open space. It is or was part of a larger tract where that tract itself, so this area up in here, is predominantly agricultural. So I think the next evaluation of land use will be more reflective of how the property is actually used for that industrial activity and reflective of what that zoning district is. Mary summarized both in the staff report and in this presentation kind of some key points that the property straddles those two tiers within the Lawrence UGA, that the project is a proposed change of use. Although the physical changes are relatively minor, there was a variance that was approved by the county's BZA for the use of gravel. The floodplain development permit for the fill has been obtained according to the evaluation, but there is another step in that floodplain evaluation, either through another floodplain development permit or to actually move through the process to amend the floodplain when you place fill If you provide the necessary studies and documentation to FEMA, it is possible to amend those maps. I think Tanya's here if you have more specific questions about the floodplain piece of that. The next couple of slides really are a summary of the review criteria that are set out in the county zoning ordinance, or kind of the findings of fact as we think of them, that the use is clearly permitted in the property as it is zoned, that the property meets the platting requirements through that correction survey. It's discussed in your staff report. That the site plan, the design of the site plan is compliant with the minimum design standards of the regulation, and that has to deal with the surfacing, setbacks, those kinds of activities. The site arrangement and the nearby uses, it really doesn't change all that much from the way the property has been used, although there was the discussion about kind of this expanded exterior storage and the appropriateness and design of necessary landscaping and buffering that is required to mitigate those views. And then as far as the egress, those have to meet those county design standards. That is something that the county engineering staff would be evaluating. Pedestrian safety is also kind of a finding. In this case, this really is not a pedestrian destination kind of use, but we do evaluate those site plans to make sure that anyone who has special needs that can reasonably get from the parking areas to the building, this project does meet that design standard. There are quite a bit of existing vegetation throughout the site that is being utilized as part of that screening that's required. And then roll-off containers would be located and screened within the site as described in the staff report and shown on the site plan. Staff's recommendation was for approval. There are a couple of conditions that go along with that that were in the front of the staff report, giving that applicant kind of that option of either another local floodplain development permit or moving through with the letter of map amendment for the fill that has been placed that would be submitted to FEMA. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll do my best with that. County staff is also here and can answer more specific questions about the project if you have those. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions top of mind for Sandy? Actually, I'm sorry, do we have the applicant with us? Oh, I see a hand back there. Would you like to provide any additional comments to the commission?
And commissioners, I might remind you, if you've had any ex parte communication related to this item, you might go ahead and say it before the applicant presents.
I would like to. I have spoken with Dean Grove, who from the back of his head, I think that's who we have here. I've also spoken with Clay Heine, who's the property owner. Both were just interested in having a clear picture of what the needs were to get to this moment of recommendation of approval. And I think all of that's been heard in the staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. This is Commissioner Reed. I do not have any ex parte communications to disclose.
Commissioner Kelly, none.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead. Thanks.
Very good. I'm Dean Grove with Grove Engineering. I guess I want to thank Mary or her stand-in, Sandy. You know, we've gone through a lot of things on this project. There's a couple things on the presentation that she provided that the line that she drew wasn't exactly right because it kind of cut to what you saw and it jogged up, whether we need to bring that slide back up. But it's all in the site plan and the acreage is right. It's just, I think in her presentation, she drew the line improperly. But, you know, we've gone through several iterations with Mary and trying to find compliance. And there's been discussions about maybe things that were done, you know, not within the regulations or within the approved site plan. Some of the things refer back to the 2001 site plan, which we all know we didn't have digital things back then, and so things were drawn and maybe they weren't exactly right. The site plan and the owner believes there was a revised site plan that showed the building at 21,000, but the one that floats around says 15,000, but it's always been 20,000. There's been no additions. The filling and some things that were talked about were done with the original construction. And I don't want to belabor the whole point because I think Mary and I've gone through just about everything and we've worked out everything. I do want to make a clarification that with the county and the state, there was an area that was a little alcove that the owner had some stuff in the floodplain that has regulations that allow you, but he maybe stepped over the line, and so he's cleaned all that up, brought everything that was in the floodplain and the floodway out, and in doing that, there was a little area that we went through the county and the state to get a floodplain fringe fill permit for a little alcove area that wasn't part of the main channel so that he could have that as exterior storage. So we went through that process with the county and the state. That was all completed and fill's been placed, but now they're kind of a second stage of a floodplain fill permit where, okay, you want to use that area so that we kind of have the documentation. And I have that form to fill out, which was the option A of the condition. And he'll most likely go through with the FEMA floodplain map modification just to kind of tie things up. But that takes a while and didn't want to slow down the site plan approval because we do have a new tenant, P1, which was the Huxtables, who's been in Lawrence forever. They're in the 2200 block of Haskell, and they kind of came down to they were growing. Where could we find someplace in Douglas County that's already got a shop that we could start in? And that kind of started the ball rolling. And, you know, they were looking for someplace immediately because their business is growing. And so Clay, like me, is getting near retirement where, hey, if somebody wants to rent my building, I'll clean up the site. They can use the building and he'll still use it. He's still got a few things to clean up. So he's kind of in the process of using the building and then turning it over to them. So I know there's some comments you'll see or have gotten from feedback. And I don't want to get into all that other than taking an opportunity at the end to say, okay, here's what I've done. And to that response, or if you have questions, I'll be able to answer them, but don't want to try and start answering answers to questions that haven't been asked. So I would take any questions now or be happy to come and talk when we're kind of done and you have questions for me. So if you have any questions, fine. Otherwise, I think for the most part in the staff report that you've got, Mary's covered everything and we're down to just that one thing, which would be basically appropriate on any site plan, that once you get to that point that, okay, if you're going to use it and you filled it, but you got to have this form. So I've got it ready to go. I'm ready to submit it if we get approval tonight. So
Okay.
I hope you see that in our favor. And if you have any questions, I'll answer them now or I'll sit back down and wait.
Thank you, Dean. Commissioner Reed, I do not have any questions for you personally. Commissioner Kelly, Commissioner Willie, any questions for Dean at the moment? Go ahead.
I do have a question, this is Commissioner Willie. Dean, you mentioned something about the site plan or the map that you thought maybe needed a different visual. Is that something that we ought to take a look at?
You can. I mean, on my site plan, it's clear, and I don't know, Sandy, can you, I don't know if we can back up.
Maybe.
Right,
Okay.
but it's in her presentation. And in my site plan, that is an example as well of
Oh, it's still sharing. Okay.
arrow left or.
Yeah. Maybe.
Okay, one forward. Okay, you see the track A, which was.
Okay, hold on. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, in the track A, which includes the property, and that there is a little, Mary has the line going straight back. So it's more of a rectangle with it goes north a little bit. Now, if you go to the other drawing that she has, couple back, I think. Or forward, yeah, one more. The green.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oops.
We got this.
Yeah, that area jogs a little bit. When you get past the yellow portion of that line, it jogs north, and there's been a berm built that's in line with the north line of that yellow property. I think just in her drawing it, you can see it kind of goes through the site that we're talking about. That I just didn't want somebody to go, well, wait a minute, it's there, but the site plan and that goes up to the center of that berm and on that property, just so there wasn't confusion that.
This is Commissioner Willie. I really appreciate that clarification because I did note on these drawings that there looked like there was, non-farm activity that was still, above that teal line. But I do see on the site plan that you put in that it does have that line jogging that would include that property there. So I'm glad for the clarification.
And I, as you mentioned, that the future plan has that as single family residential, but it is zoned industrial. We've never rezoned anything, and that was from, I believe, in the 50s, and then it was zoned industrial. And so that can still remain industrial.
Commissioner Willie, did you hear Dean's response okay? He was a little bit far from the microphone, so just want to make sure you heard that.
I did, but thanks for asking.
Thank you. All right.
Any other questions for Dean at the moment? Okay, thank you, Dean. We'll let you know if we have more questions later. Did that bring up any further questions for Sandy before we open public comment?
Sandy, can you walk through? I read the application a couple times, but I think you need to make it simpler for me. It was in the floodplain, it was filled, it was approved, it was not, we have some public comment and some communication about that studies weren't done. Can you just walk us through the sequence of when the floodplain was filled in, how it was used, and what applications were done?
And Sandy, if you want Carl or Tanya to help you out, if they know more, they can do so.
Yeah, that's not, I try to, through Mary's
yes.
work pretty quickly. So it looked like that work was done well before any of this. But I don't know that for certain. I don't know if.
Tanya Voigt, Zoning and Codes Director. So I actually don't know when the fill was placed. I know this is a question for staff, sorry. But the fill was placed. They got an after-the-fact permit with the state of Kansas, which means the fill was already there. We can't permit anything locally unless the state has approved it. So then we were able to issue the local floodplain permit after the state permitted the fill.
And Tanya, can you describe what happens when the state gives that permit?
Yeah, floodplain fill is a requirement anytime in the floodplain. Floodways treated a little bit differently. Floodplain means it's an area that's been studied, it's in a fringe, so we know base flood elevation information. What they do is they verify that the fill, they usually want to know the amount of fill being brought in. They want to verify typically that it's less than a foot. And then if the state can verify that, then they just allow that in any floodplain across the state as long as it meets those thresholds.
And do they offer, we heard from the, we have some communication in our packet asking about what were the impacts to the drainage district, what were the impacts downstream from that because of that fill?
Yeah, they don't
make any determination on that.
That's correct.
Okay. If I may, the floodplain fill permit, I didn't bring photos this evening. Mr. Heine owns property across the street when we did it, and he started off filling and then realized he was in the floodplain, stopped. We got an after the fact, submitted it to the state. One of the things that was across the street, he removed soil from the floodplain to provide extra storage on that. gave cross sections, and the state looks at it and says, okay, based on the fill you're producing versus the size of the floodplain and the removal of soil from the floodplain across the street, that they say, okay, the little bit of fill, now it was over a foot. If it's less than a foot, you show documentation to this DWR at the state, and they say, okay, you don't need a permit. In this case, it went through the process and the permit, and the 30 days, and they sent it to all the agencies and said, we've evaluated it based on this information and gave him a permit to fill in that area.
Okay.
And again, it was, some areas it was less than a foot, but some areas and it was just to kind of square off that storage area, and it's in the one drawing that Mary presented to you that was on my site plan. So it went through that process, and as Tanya said, they won't provide a county permit until the state, who is I guess the step below FEMA, to say, yeah, we've looked at it and believe that that is not a detrimental situation of filling in the floodplain.
Okay.
If that happens.
Sure.
All righty.
Thanks.
To follow up on that, so there's been some floodplain fill that has been permitted, but other floodplain, oh my gosh, tongue twister to trip around these words, other fill activity that has occurred that is not yet permitted and or is in progress. Am I tracking that piece of it right?
So all the floodplain fill has been permitted.
Okay.
The second step would be what they're showing on the site plan is exterior storage, which would be the, storage of materials. That could be trucks, semis, whatever, they intend to store in the floodplain that's still mapped in the floodplain. That's the permit that they've not obtained locally yet. And we have local rules that allow us to assess storage in the floodplain. Has to be readily removable quickly. So usually needs to be on a trailer with wheels that can be hooked up and driven out rather rapidly in the event of a flood event. I think what Dean said they prefer to do is actually not go through the exterior storage. Because they've placed the fill, they can now go through the paperwork to actually map out of the floodplain, and then they don't need to meet the requirements of storage in the floodplain because they'll be mapped out.
Thank you. That's
Yes.
helpful clarity.
If I may, we are going through that process now because just with FEMA to do everything and send them the stuff, we don't want to wait 4 months for them to finally come back and then say, okay, so we're taking this step so they can move forward, get an approved site plan so that P1 can do some modifications to the building and start using the facility, in the meantime, while we're waiting on FEMA. That it's a simple process, but it still takes months to get everything done and make everybody happy. So we're going through that process anyway.
Thank you, Dean. I want to rewind a little bit, something I think I heard you just say, that I certainly understand that you have that process in progress and that this site plan, if approved, is conditioned based on the result of that. But I think I just heard you say that to take this site plan first in part is because then they can start using it. Can you elaborate what you mean?
Well, using the building because it's a change of use. We would still only use that, and it's been filled, but it's not been certified, based on the previous permit that area's been. So when we go the next step and certify that it's above the floodplain, and we get a letter of map change from FEMA, then the permit we're getting from the county right now kind of becomes a moot point. And again, it's not that they're going to go out there and start putting things. It's just that was a condition of site plan approval. And so, hey, we'll do that just so we can get approval, move on. But it would still be under those guidelines of the permit now until such time as we get the letter of map change from FEMA several months down the road.
Okay.
That more difficult than.
All right. Thank you for those comments, Dean.
Commissioner, can I have a clarifying question?
A clarifying question for Dean, is that what you mean?
Yes,
Okay.
about what we just covered, but I think I understood it and I want to check. So if Dean, if you don't mind coming back up, In our staff recommendation, we have one condition, and it can be either A or B. And I think you're saying that you're kind of pursuing both A and B, which A is the floodplain development permit through the county, and B is the FEMA remapping so that you don't need it. I think those are the two things that are running concurrently, not that you're planning to use the building with the CUP before you've followed up on the condition. Did I hear that right?
No, I've got the condition, I got the permit ready for condition A. The FEMA map would just be so that in the future, oh, we go through this, we're jumping, wait a minute, no, we've done the letter of map change so that it's all clear, but it's just this until such time as that permit can be obtained from FEMA, because they're anxious to get in. Nobody may be in this area of the external storage, but we don't want to wait till FEMA can get us a permit so that they can get an approved site plan. So we're taking option A, but I'm going to pursue option B just for the future so that, it's a moot point in the future if something changes.
I follow you. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Kelly, I see you're unmuted. Is that on purpose? Do you have some further questions?
No, it's just miking my brain thinking, that's all.
Yep,
Thanks.
got it. Okay, Commissioner Willie, any other questions before I open this for public comment? All right. With that, is there anybody in the building who would like to make public comment? Come on ahead. And just a reminder, please state your name and Douglas County residence for the record. Thank you.
I put in a USB for a PowerPoint. I did not know that. I've never been to the county commission before. My name is Margreta DeFries. I live on North Michigan Street. I have some technical abilities, and I am friends with Natalia Lowther, who is directly impacted by the floodplain changes that the site changes have impacted. And so I put together some images to quickly go through to show you, and I guess it's kind of an on-point title, but I'm going to run through this really fast, and you can have the PowerPoint presentation if you want it. But all of this is images that I took off of the site plan or from the city-county online GIS mapping, so it's all available to everybody. Thank you. So this is what it looked like in 2000 before the original site permit was given. This is the original site permit with a 15,000 square foot building and about a 15,000 or so square foot storage area. This is the same image overlaid on the satellite image. This is where I think the edge of the floodplain is based on reading the site map from 2001. This is what it looked like by 2003, where I have added these orange lines to show you where the original site plan building is, and that's going to stay in here throughout. So there's 2003. You can see there's quite a bit of fill activity going on here already. I've highlighted what I think was added from the previous image in each of these. So here's 2006. Here's 2009. Here's the 2010 flood zone map from FEMA. You can see how much it has moved from the original site plan. I've added lines so that when I put in a graphic later, you'll know this is, I was not doing a super good job, obviously, but it's close. Here is the 2009 without the fill. This is the complaint response that Natalia got from, I believe, the state, saying that they needed to do a survey, and she did a CORA request to find out what happened, and no information was provided of a survey ever having been done. Here's 2013. Again, yellow is new areas. Here's 2016, 2018. Here's the 2019 flood zone, and here's how much it has shifted from the original flood zone in 2001. These are the average rainfalls of several flooding events in the last 7 years or so. These are some images of flooding in the Maple Grove tributary. This is what it looked like when it flooded in 1997 and 1999 for comparison. And there is the image of the new site plan overlaid over the satellite, so you can see the comparison of how they go. So I'm going to leave you this USB to keep this if you like. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here who would like to provide public comment at this time?
Natalia Lowther, 1480 North 1700 Road. My farm is west and south of the newly combined 1723 East 1500 Road. I see some good changes there. A new tenant working indoors instead of the previous unpermitted salvage operation outside should provide a be much better if it proceeds as planned. And I'm very glad that most of the salvage material has been removed. My biggest concern is stormwater. There are several aspects. One, recent grading does not seem to be returning the land to the original 2000 contours. In fact, there's currently very steep new grades where the original site plan showed floodway. Areas within the original FEMA boundaries must be returned to original contours. Those steeper slopes move stormwater quickly into the floodway. The narrower floodway holds less, so it fills more rapidly and pushes stormwater onto neighbors, specifically my pecan grove to the west and the field to the south where Scott Thelman farms organically. 3, no formal stormwater study was done. The staff report only states, county engineer noted that detention would not be effective at this location. This completely disregards HR 2011-2, Maple Grove Stormwater Management Standards. I see 3 alternatives to simply ignoring that the regulation exists. 1, the county engineer could waive the standards. I don't think he can, but if so, this should be formally noted on the site plan for future reference. 2, defer the site plan until a text amendment allows HR 2011-2 to be waived, thus establishing a formal process and standards for waiver. 3, modify the use so that compliance with HR 2011-2 is possible. If stormwater truly cannot be detained, the site should be undeveloped. The status quo is that neighboring farms are the default stormwater detention structures for the site. HR 2011-2 was created to prevent this from happening. Other recent site plans and CUP revisions have complied. The Sod Shop, Heinen Outdoor Power Equipment, Midwest Custom Pools, and Pine Landscaping all include carefully planned detention areas. Please deny this site plan and direct that any revised site plan include mandatory return to the original 2000 contours within the original floodplain area so that FEMA revisions shift the floodplain closer to its original location away from agricultural lands and include stormwater detention runoff to capture from the entire developed portion of the site so there was no net increase in runoff compared to 2000, and revise the lighting to eliminate glare on North Street residences. It was never reviewed.
Thank you, Natalia. Is there anybody else here who would like to provide public comment? Okay, see nobody in the room. Double check for anybody online. All right, thank you, Sarah. Go ahead and close public comment and bring this back for further questions and discussion amongst the commission. Commissioner Willie, I'm looking up at you first. Do you have any thoughts top of mind?
I think we have the applicant gets a chance to respond to public comment.
Thank you for that reminder. I appreciate it, Chair Willie. Dean, you're welcome to come back up and provide any response to the comments that were heard.
My Grove Engineering pen doesn't work, so maybe that's not a good sign. I will try and address a few of the things. I think starting with groundwater, the permit that I submitted to the state and the fact that he had removed significant soil from the pond on the other side of the road. There's obviously pictures where the latest aerials where the pond is quite large compared to 2013 when it had been silted in. The county is right. In just about any community, they don't require detention when you're directly adjacent to the floodplain, and I'll try and explain this without getting too technical. The idea is if you're next to the floodplain, let your water get in, get out, be controlled, that you don't want to hold water right next to the floodplain. And then as upstream water comes down, you're finally releasing it when the peak flow is finally reached, and now you're adding more water at the wrong time. The other thing is too, is when you're directly adjacent to the floodplain, if we have a retention pond and it's right adjacent to the floodplain, it's gonna flow into the floodplain because you're just, right next to it versus a lot of times upstream detention, retention, the best place to have it is at the uppermost reach of a drainage basin because it's going to do the most good. So you're holding it up here till almost everything is through the floodplain and then it gets released. The other thing that we use detention or retention for is because as you do more development, it's the infrastructure of culverts and things that, okay, a little more development. So you're holding some of that water so that every culvert downstream isn't flooding or being have more flow than it's designed. So you hold some as you get up there, but when you get near the bottom of that, you let it go into the floodplain and be the first in, first out kind of thing. And that's in about any community, and that's what Mr. Voigt had mentioned, or why, when we looked at it, that was his opinion. Again, the other thing is we got a variance, requested a variance so that all the drive lanes and the parking remain gravel, which are, I guess, quasi semi-pervious. They're not impervious, they're not completely pervious like a soil, but they will obviously take more water than a hard paved surface, so that the exterior storage within the regulations could be gravel. And so by doing that, we didn't just go out and want to pave the entire exterior storage area that would create runoff with almost zero infiltration. So we went through that process, but again, Mr. Voigt said, hey, with what you're doing gravel, it's going right into the floodplain, that it's hard to then assess that and do retention. Again, with the floodplain permit, increasing storage over here versus decreasing in that. So that is that point. I will admit the same photos that she showed before, I did the same thing. The 01 floodplain permit kind of went catty corner and didn't line up with the existing channel because those were created with 10-foot interval US quad map long before we had LiDAR data and all that. So some of them were not as accurate just because 10 foot that they were trying to draw a line where they think it was, and it wasn't always there. They made the interpretation. I do know, as she mentioned in the site plan, well, it said a 15,000 foot building. The owner says it was always 20,000. I don't know exactly what all happened, or because I wasn't a part of that, but he said that was always the building. And again, it was a little more difficult in 01 because a lot of things were on Mylar. They weren't on AutoCAD where you just change something and you crank it out. I can't speak to that other than he said it's always been 20,000. They never changed that. Did the exterior storage grow? But he said what you saw in that one pile, there was some gravel piled up. He did use the floodplain. He was using it, as there's provisions. Did he step over the line? I don't know, but that's all been cleaned up and taken care of so they can move forward. It was iron things that weren't floatable that, he couldn't easily remove them, but they weren't. The idea is the floodplain, you don't want something that's gonna go downstream and clog a culvert or something. So it didn't exactly fit the new regulations of either anchored down or removable, but required by Douglas County zoning codes. He's cleaned all that up to move on to this next step. So right now we have nothing but the area designated in the floodplain, which was permitted, He's cleaning up and he's removed everything. He's got a little seeding to do in that area of the floodplain, but that's been being taken care of. So can I say, I don't have a crystal ball to say what was absolutely compliant. I don't know why, and I do know that, I've only been doing this since '05, that some things I don't know the file, and Mary's not here because I know we talked about things that get in the file, if somewhere along the line they said, okay, the building's 20,000, and it just went into the file, and they didn't go back and change the drawing. I don't know exactly what happened, but there was a lot of things in the file that Mary brought to my attention that were in there that didn't just pop out on the site plan. So again, I think some of the things with the new site plan, talking about external storage, the building, berms, the building and the berm and the exterior storage is twice what the front setback is required. So it's way back from the road. I will say, because of the technicality, I sent out notices twice. And the only one that I got was from a gentleman just asked what was going on. He said, I must say, Clay's kept the place as clean as anybody in North Lawrence. So, I don't know, the county would have to speak to any complaints, but the comment I got was, hey, he's kept it clean. And the fact that because it's so far back from the road, that pleasing look, that probably more people would probably drive down North 7th Street or E1500 and wouldn't even recognize or notice the building because of the setback that's double what is required by code. So I don't know that I've addressed everything, but I mean, some of the things with drainage and that, I think we've taken care of. And that's why we talked about it, and he didn't want a drainage study because draining in the floodplain is just, what every community does. So.
Thank you.
So Dean, just to confirm, you haven't done a hydraulic or a hydrology study at all?
With the permit to the state, did the area and the fill and the material removed from the other side far exceeded the impervious, the granular surface and the fill that we were putting in. So they didn't say, oh, wait a minute, filling this, now we got all this other problem. So
Dean,
in that, I provided to the state.
I'm asking a specific question. It's just yes or no, right? Have you done a hydrology study on this property?
Have I done a full report and turned it in? No, I have looked at the drainage, so.
Thank you, Dean. Commissioner Willie, I'll turn back to you and pitch the same question as before. Questions?
I actually have a question probably for Sandy, and that's not only was there communication in the packet, but also in public comment about lighting. Often that's part of a site plan. Was that just, I know it was Mary and not you, but was that talked about, or is there anything that could be or should be done for lighting at that property?
I don't know the details of that. Any site plan would be subject to the minimum lighting standards of the county zoning code. So if there's any kind of permitting that's associated, the applicant, if you will, would have to be compliant with that lighting level, with those things being shielded and directed down. And that could be executed at any time in this process.
So I know there's a topography difference and that may be part of the problem, but is the lighting that's there shielded in the way that the county requires?
I can't answer that question at all.
Maybe Tanya can.
The lighting standards were adopted with the new zoning regulations. And so this previous site plan would not have had a requirement to meet the lighting standards of today. So what we'll do is we'll look at it now that it's new use. When they apply for their building permit, we'll verify the lighting and verify that it's shielded. If it's not, we'll ask them to do it before we issue the building permit.
Thank you. Tanya, I've got actually one more question and then I think I'm caught up. So there was a suggestion about whether the topography should be put back to the 2001 or so floodplain topography, but that permit from the state probably makes that not, I mean, the state has permitted what's there, right?
That's correct. They've permitted what's there. There was some question about floodway fill and the floodway getting narrower. The state and the county have not permitted any fill in the floodway. So I don't know much about that, but I believe that the permit was only for floodplain fringe fill, not floodway. So that would be an entirely different process and it would require hydraulic analysis.
Thank you.
If I may. I had a picture of the lights on the building, and Mary asked and went to the site, and I'm pretty sure that was one of the things that she was looking at, but they are shielded lights. Now, the county code doesn't have the same as the city code in terms of lumens and that, but she did look at the lighting and we discussed that. And I don't know that she did not put that in her report that I noted, but she did request and went to the site to look at various things. But they are shielded lights.
Thank you, Dean.
On the building.
Commissioner Riley, do you have any other questions, or that's it for you? Okay. Commissioner Kelly, any further questions from you? I don't know that I think I'm having a hard time fully grasping this, if I'm being honest. It's kind of a confusing one. And similar to Commissioner Kelly, I read it a couple times, and the sequence of things and the sort of what's within our authority and the question before us versus those requirements from the state in terms of permitting around some of this. Just trying to understand, maybe this is a question, Sandy and Tanya, I don't know if either of you can just help me understand if there's some like other examples of where this condition, this option A or option B condition has maybe been applied in other types of site plans. Because in some ways it seems like that piece is important to have done first. That's what my gut says.
There are two distinct things that are going on with the floodplain. One was the activity or the action that dealt with the fill in the fringe area. That's one thing. Can you place fill in the floodplain, whether that's site prep or whatever? The next question is, what can you do? How can you use that land? So the conditions reflect how you can use that land. So that is where the applicant is kind of been given this choice. They've done the fill. Until they go that next step and work through FEMA, that property is still mapped floodplain. Even though it may be engineered out of the floodplain, it's still part of the mapped floodplain, and therefore it is subject to the requirements. So when the applicant is coming forward and saying, we want to use this area that we filled, that's part of the floodplain development permit for them to be able to move forward. The FEMA process is a very lengthy one. So in order for them to be able to move forward, they've kind of been given a choice. Now, this is really an issue of belt and suspenders to me. That's how I view it. The belt piece is getting the local floodplain development permit that allows them to identify and comply with the site plan that you can have exterior storage in the floodplain. If they go through the permitting process at the local level that says, okay, if we're going to have stuff out there as part of our condition of compliance, if we've got anything out there, it's got to be trailered, it's got to be ready to haul out if there is an event, that covers that piece. In the meantime, while they are working through the FEMA process, once that's mapped, and the county would get a letter of map revision, I think, is what that's called. And that's where Dean is saying this becomes moot, because once FEMA acts, there's no more floodplain to regulate because it's been engineered.
And maybe if I could say it, because I think, just want to be clear what the commissioner's question was,
Okay.
which is some of it was done before, and some of this is bringing it into compliance, but there is one piece here that needs to be taken care of at this time in the outdoor storage fill.
And that
Right.
has to do with the use.
Was I right? Yes, yeah.
Has to do with the use,
Okay.
the activity.
Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sarah, and thank you, Sandy. If I'm hearing you right, then I just get down to, I think I'm very confused by the word "or," because the way you just described that to me is that both things apply.
Well, here's the or part. The FEMA process is rigorous. It's possible, there's probably a remote chance, but it's possible they could go through the FEMA work and FEMA would say, nope, we're going to leave it, even though you filled it, we're going to leave it mapped. Then they are still subject, because it's mapped, to regulatory floodplain, and they are subject to the county zoning ordinance. So that's the or part. I don't think that we do an or in recommendations very often. We would typically come forward with A, B, C, D. FEMA is a little bit of a different animal.
This isn't a question, Sandy, so you don't
Okay.
have to stand there if you don't
Okay,
want
that's
to. I think I appreciate that we're trying to get properties into compliance. My concern about this application is that something was done that should not have been done. We put fill into the floodplain, and now we're trying to use our processes to make it okay. And that's what I'm struggling with in this application. And not only that, but we're asking for, can we just go ahead and approve the site plan now so we can move along? Because it takes a long time. I am hesitant to grant that kind of leniency to a property that the owner has violated the floodplain already. And I think there's an opportunity there to say, you didn't do right what you should have done in the first place. You're not getting this site plan until we get a FEMA map that does it otherwise. I would even go far to say, like, maybe FEMA's is enough, but I'm not sure what the impacts, it may not be in the floodplain anymore, but there will be impacts downstream because they filled in that floodplain. That's where my concern is. I think we're jumping ahead and not assessing what's already happened, which according to the neighbors and according to the drainage district is has an impact on their property.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Kelly. I think I thank you for that articulation, because I feel the same way, and for me, that's part of the why A or B, because to me it seems like if we're gonna allow this site plan based on our county zoning and codes office working with folks to bring them into compliance and find processes and pathways to do that, that it feels like if and when and if only when a letter of map amendment from FEMA is received, then would it be appropriate for us to move forward? And I mean, I think there could be more to that also, but I think the A or B option is not sitting well with me, and feels the only benefit is for an applicant who has already done things out of compliance. And I appreciate our staff's desire to always bring folks into compliance and correct issues and make them better. And I also appreciate hearing from a neighbor that there are some really positive things about this site plan and some changes that could help make some amends perhaps for some of that. But it does seem like there's more information to understand about the potential impacts, and I don't feel very inclined to grant a site plan prior to knowing if FEMA at bare minimum would say, what you did is okay enough by us now, we will change maps accordingly, and then that changes what zoning and codes and planning staff look at in terms of allowable use.
I mean, because, thank you, I see you, Commissioner Willie. I mean, one thing I'm thinking about is FEMA may change the map, but that may put someone else in the floodplain that's not in the floodplain now. And while that works for the applicant, I'm not sure it works for the others. Commissioner Willie, I'm sorry you had to raise your hand and I interrupted you.
I think I have a different understanding of the A and B, and I'd like to run it by Sandy or Tanya or whatever. My understanding from what I've heard tonight is that under A, you can store things with wheels. Under B, you can store things without wheels. Like, I'm not sure it's that different. I mean, nothing's changing with either A or B, the sculpture of the land or the flow of the water or any of those things. Like, that happened longer ago in this timeline, and the state has already weighed in and said they've permitted it. So I don't think that falls under our purview anymore. So I'm just trying to make sure that I understand, like, what is ours to weigh in on and what isn't.
I looked behind me at Tanya and we're kind of nodding our heads that does seem to kind of encapsulate staff's understanding of the situation.
Sandy, just to be clear, you mean the option A is specific to things needing to be on wheels and immediately movable, yes, versus B would not have that requirement, correct? Okay. Yeah.
So if I can, Commissioner Willie here, so if I can further say, like, I think if the applicant goes with option A, they'll comply with that. So I hope if they go with option B, then they'd have more options there. But I don't think it's that different for us. So I don't have any heartache at all over the A and B as presented here.
Commissioner Willie, I don't have any problem with A or B either. I have a problem with the fact that we filled the floodplain before we got a FEMA approval here. That's my issue.
Commissioner Willie here, I can completely concur with that. I also know that we in the rural area lived under the Zoning and Codes Office previously that did not work to get people in compliance and just worked to punish. And this move to people made mistakes and now we try and work with them. Like, I think in general is something that I very much support and completely think that they are changing the way that the community interacts with them and trusts them. So I'm always cautious if we want to say we're going to go back to that older way of doing things, because some of us have to live under that. I absolutely recognize that the fill was out of order and but that out of order has already been permitted by the state after the fact. And I don't think that falls under our jurisdiction. I would say that the moving the storage out of the floodplain, floodway, and into a consolidated area that's on the site plan, that has a berm, it's shielded from view. Like, these are some huge gains that unless we work with property owners to try and get them into compliance, we don't get those things to happen either. So we've gained a lot in the process. Zoning and Codes, I think, has had a long process with this property. So that's my thought.
Tanya or Sandy, is it your opinion that the option A is a necessary option to be able to enforce around concerns that we have about this property and the equipment storage and the floodway or the floodplain?
Based on the way the property is mapped today, that is an absolutely appropriate action to require of the applicant to get the local floodplain development permit. Until that mapping is changed, that is what they are subject to. That is the law of the land.
And without option A, while waiting for option B, there's not much of an enforcement I'm not phrasing my question very well. Sorry, I'm thinking and trying to talk at the same time. Tanya, so maybe you understand where I'm going with that.
Yeah, I think so. So if you did not approve option A, they would not be able to have any exterior storage until that area is mapped out of the floodplain. And then at that point, they can still show future, storage out of the floodplain. And then as long as the site plan reflects that, we would allow that to be permitted, but we would not allow any storage in the floodplain without A. And can I note, I think some of the pressure that you guys are feeling is typically, this is not in the traditional order of things. Granted, yes, but we're dealing with an existing circumstances that were, long before our staff. And but what I do want to point out is when we issue a building permit on a property, which they have a building permit sitting in our office. So when they issue a building permit, we check the site for compliance. When they're not in compliance, we ask them to come into compliance. We've been holding that building permit for a year, maybe. So I think that's why you are seeing this in kind of a rushed or faster than anyone might typically want to, ideally we would rather not see storage in the floodplain and we would rather see it mapped out. But they are also waiting on a building permit and they need to be compliant with their site plan.
Tanya, why have they been waiting on a building permit for so long? It's because we haven't had the site plan, or we just?
Because we don't, well, first of all, they're a zoning violation in various aspects, the floodplain, all that storage in the floodplain. And in addition to that, we don't have an updated site plan reflecting the new use, so the change in use. So we're not able to issue a building permit because that's all related to a new use that hasn't been approved yet.
This is Commissioner Willie. Tanya, you're saying this is the process that we have before us tonight that approves that new use and then it moves on. Is that right? Or is there some other process?
Yep, that's correct. So if you issue approval of the site plan, we can move forward with the building permit. How you want to handle the floodplain, we can go with whatever recommendation you wish.
So I'm trying to find a way to honor the need to work towards compliance, but also sort of recognize the neighbors' concerns around how this property impacts the floodplain and what they've done in the past. And what I heard you say, Tanya, was even if we gave them a site plan, we could condition on the site plan that no storage, outdoor storage, could happen in the floodplain at all.
Correct.
At this time, right?
Correct.
And that in order for them to do that, I mean, that would essentially take A off the table, right? And say you need to wait to store things there until you get this FEMA mapped. Okay, I don't have, I'm just thinking through what our options may be here.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Kelly, and to pull that thread a little bit further, obviously without going into the depths of what that building permit includes, activities, if a site plan was approved, as Commissioner Kelly just described, that would still restrict or disallow equipment storage in that floodplain unless and until B occurs. The site plan would trigger the ability for staff to move forward with the building permit, and there may be some requests in that building permit that are not deemed allowable by staff at this point based on the lack of that FEMA map amendment, but other elements of the building permit process could continue to move forward without being fully hindered.
That's correct. The structure is completely outside of the special flood hazard area. So we would be able to move forward because it's not in the floodplain.
And we could, sorry, Commissioner Willie, go ahead.
I can wait too. This question also for Tanya, because we have a thing called a floodplain permit, if an area complies with and is able to put in the paperwork to ask for that, do we have the ability to just say, in this case, you can apply and we're going to say no? I just want to make sure I know, are we allowed to say option A is off the table, or is that like a taking?
That's a great question. I think because there was fill placed without permit and we don't know the true elevations, I think that we have more leverage in the unknown because it is in the floodplain. And that fill has not, well, the fill has been permitted by the state, but yeah, I don't know that I have a good answer for that.
So
Karen?
can I offer a possible, I'm trying to, Tanya, like your thought on this. So one thing we could do is defer tonight's request and ask staff to meet with the applicant to determine how to address the use in that zone and how we might come back once that FEMA permit, assuming it is approved, because we may want to look at how that land, we may not allow storage in that, depending on, you think we have to allow storage. I'm watching your face here, and for those people who only see the back of your head.
So the floodplain regulations do allow storage in the floodplain in the fringe. So I would say as long as, the maps don't change, as long as everything, so part of the process of them mapping out, I believe, does some further study to verify that what they've requested is what is true to the ground. I think the state permits for fill are pretty bureaucratic, to be honest, and there's not a lot of site visits and verifying and elevations. I mean, Dean can confirm, but I don't think any elevations have been done of that fill. Sorry.
Dean,
I'm so sorry.
if Commissioner asks you a question, we'll let you know. Thank you for that, Tanya. Do you have a follow-up question?
I want to give Dean a chance. He's been waiting patiently. So Dean, what do you got to say? Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to clarify something. I mean, there has not been, with the existing site plan or the existing site, now, decide where the lines were and the building size, but there's been no illegal documented fill on what's there now. It's the area on the north side that he began grading for future expansion. He got into the fill. Now, whether the county saw it or somebody acknowledged that, hey, he pulled the material back and we submitted the permit. So it's just the area and the future external storage area in question. I mean, the fill on the south side, all the site plan on the south area is all outside the floodplain. It was that particular area that he started to fill as he was grading that north area for future expansion, got in that and somebody said, hey, you've encroached on the floodplain. He brought it back. So in 21, we did the permit to fill that. The state could have said, no, take it out, you can't do it. So again, that grading something and moving into it and stopping it and taking it back out because you weren't supposed to, and then going through the permit with the state, that they had no reason to say, oh, well, you started, because the state does have an after the fact permit, because people do it all the time, that somebody doesn't know a documented floodplain and they fill in there, and then they spend, it's more money because they look at it and say, okay, what's going on here? With this one, again, nothing other than the area in that north exterior storage area was ever filled, documented filled in the floodplain. When it happened, he pulled it back, he got a permit, he's filled it. He's never done final elevations, because we were through this process, so didn't know. If tonight you feel comfortable with saying, hey, you can't use that area until you get a FEMA letter of map change, then that's fine. He doesn't have to have that area today. It was just so while that process was going on, that it wasn't a matter of drawing a line out there and saying, oh, don't move into that area. It's been filled, and keep it in mind, because the state allowed us to fill it. It's above the floodplain, so we're really asking for a permit to put something in an area that wouldn't flood. But I don't want some of the discussions that illegal fill, that a little bit was placed, he stopped, pulled it back, got a permit in that new area. That I don't think there's any documentation that, oh, there's been illegal fill for years and years. That line is crazy, I couldn't figure it out. But there's no documented, he went and did something and everybody said, you can't do it, you know, and he got a permit later. So it's just the area in the north area that's shown on that drawing. And then, again, if you want to remove that, we'll be okay, and we'll take care of the paperwork. Unless it's just a matter of, okay, once he gets the documentation, it goes to the office and they put it into the file that, okay, now you can use that area that was shown as in the floodplain. So if that makes everybody happy, I'm sure you would be okay with that.
This is Commissioner Willie. Sandy, can I ask you, what area are we talking about that counts as this storage area for the floodplain? Is it to the north or is it in one of the other pieces?
I'm going to do my best to try to understand what area we're talking about. Give me a moment, please. I think it is at this area.
That area, exactly.
It's this area that really is in question. So this is the piece of land. Are you able to see this?
I am, yes.
Okay, thank you. This is the area that on the site plan is shown as part of the exterior storage area. This is also the portion of the property that is encumbered by what I would refer to as the regulatory floodplain, and it will remain part of the regulatory floodplain until or unless FEMA makes that change. So what I heard the applicant state was that they could accept a site plan approval with this area specifically being excluded as part of their exterior storage requirement with this project. And then,
until FEMA, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, so then they would have to revise the site plan to show that, maybe have some labeling that says prohibited storage area, and then they may choose to continue on with the FEMA process and then come forward with a revision to the site plan to request that storage area to be expanded in the future. So it's a multi-step approach to getting at where we're at tonight.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Commissioner Willie, other questions while you're unmuted? Or comments?
I guess I had a little bit of the order operations, maybe not quite right in my head. I was thinking of like longer ago, Phil, that maybe happened there, but this is the more recent that the state has actually permitted this in the north spot, and then the FEMA is coming later. So I guess I don't struggle with this in quite the same way. I don't have any idea how rigorous the state looks at these in terms of their flood impact. And does that meet our local standards? Are they higher or lower than what we would want the state to be looking at? I don't have any feel for that at all. I'm just, I am concerned about changes to, I'm always concerned about changes to floodplain and floodway and what that impact is. But I feel a little like my hands are tied if the state has signed off on that. And maybe that's, I don't know if that's, I guess I'm curious if Tanya feels like I am on the right track with that, or if this is something I should let go.
So I've given your earlier question a little bit more thought. Typically, we deal with residential parcels out in the county. This is different because it's an industrial/commercial property. If we don't identify exterior storage on the site plan, they're a violation no matter where it's located. So it would be, if you don't allow exterior storage and they put exterior storage on the property, whether it's in the floodplain or not, it would be a violation. So Karen, as you were saying earlier, would it be a taking if we don't allow them to have exterior storage, if it meets the exterior storage standards, as long as it's identified in the site plan, it's approved on the site plan, it's identified as in the floodplain, then they would just need to meet the floodplain standards, which are the wheels. But if it's not approved on the site plan, then they would be in violation and they would not be compliant. Does that help?
I think so, yes.
So I appreciate all the discussion and I appreciate staff's time on this because I think part of what I feel like we're struggling with is the fact that the state will approve fill in the floodplain. I mean, when you get right down to it, that seems to be the issue to me, is that whether the applicant did it, pulled it back, got approved to do it, and then put it back. I think we have a value here at the Douglas County Commission, as we have expressed on some other applications, that we don't support filling in the floodplain. Leave it alone. And so I'm conflicted here in the fact that they have the FEMA permit, and I think it does impact our neighbors. I think that's what I've heard directly from our neighbors, is that it's impacting them. And then the applicant is saying, and staff is saying, look, they have the FEMA permit, that's in the past, we're good to go. I do think, like, maybe I got caught up in exterior storage having a bigger impact than it does. We're not talking about something building or creating an impervious surface here, which would increase the impacts of water. But I don't know how we cannot regulate what FEMA does. And if FEMA is going to approve fill as a practice, I think maybe that's something that we think about forward in our plans and in our documents going forward. But I don't think we can go back in time and undo that. So that's just what's at top of mind. I hear the neighbors' concerns and I want to validate them. And at the same time, undoing that seems, I think what Commissioner Willie said, outside of our purview. It's been approved by FEMA already, and our regulations allow us to store things in the floodplain, which is what the applicant is asking for.
I just want to make a slight correction. Approved by the state, not FEMA yet.
Thank you. Approved by the state.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, Commissioner Kelly, and I think what it really boils down to is I feel very unclear about what can be done about the collateral damage and the impact to the neighbors, most likely, but one neighbor that we've heard from in particular, and how it is that what is possible to try and rectify that. Reversing it is not really a feasible likelihood as far as I can tell. So certainly, if the state permit that already exists, and then if FEMA grants that map amendment, those are all positives for the landowner, for the applicant, for the business that wants to use that. And it's not clear to me anyway what sort of remedies or possibilities are taken into account for what the downstream impact is, and how that could very well mean that someone else or other properties have a new large portion in the floodplain that didn't exist before as a result of this change. So I'm really struggling with that part. It does not feel good. Which, sometimes the decisions before us are tough like that, and then don't feel good. I'm trying to figure out what a good compromise is. I was I guess liking the idea of sort of removing the option A and which would allow a site permit to still trigger a building permit review and further process with some constraints, but I also am not sure how much that achieves towards the thing that I'm most concerned with and troubled by, which is what do we do about the consequences, whether they were unintended or not.
Well, Commissioner Reed, this is Karen Willie, Commissioner Willie. One of the things that we put in our comprehensive plan for the city and the county was to strengthen our floodplain regulations. And I think it's pretty clear that we haven't. So I think maybe that's the part that's causing some discomfort. In the meantime, the things that fulfill the requirements, federal, state, local, I think we have to abide by. So I think that's where the discomfort is there's a value that we have stated that we have not yet done anything about, and maybe that's not a fair assessment, but I think there's work to be done there. And by strengthening those local requirements, it would help us to ask the right questions. Because right now we have an assumption of harm, but we don't have data. We don't have any engineering studies about what did this do to the floodplain? What did this do to nearby flooding and neighbors? Like the flooding that was shown in public comment was from 97, which predates all of this. So we know that area floods because all of North Lawrence and all of Grant Township, or the southern part, is in a floodplain of some kind or another. So I think we're dealing with some unknowns and some assumptions that I wish we had a chance to dig into, but it's also after the fact. And I think just looking at the application that's before us, I think to my mind, the set of narrow paths are fairly clear.
Sorry, your public comment's already been made, and this is I'm sorry, your comments can't be heard by anybody that's on Zoom, and we've closed public comment at this point, so this is just time for discussion amongst commissioners.
I would ask fellow commissioners, did I get that year wrong? Did I misunderstand?
No, sorry. I don't. Does staff have any response or clarification to give to Commissioner Willie's comment? Okay. Commissioner Willie, I appreciate that and the position that just the circumstances maybe have put us in. Commissioner Kelly, I heard you earlier start to talk about a possible deferment, and some conversation has gone elsewhere since then, but I just want to circle back and ask if there was any thoughts to complete there.
Yeah, I just don't, as you said, it doesn't feel good, and I think that's where I am as well, is I think we need to strengthen our floodplain development code. I mean, we just have to do that. Tanya, do you have something?
Sorry, I was really itching to make a comment there. So one thing that we have continuously, the floodplain regulations were updated, I think, maybe 2 years ago. But we talked about this exact thing about placement of fill in the floodplain. And the thing that had us holding back, so we can be stricter than the state and the federal government at any point with the floodplain regulations. And that feels really comfortable until you start having the conversation about how many possible buildable lots you're taking out of inventory. And so we have a requirement of 3 acres outside of the floodplain in order to build a home. And there will be sometimes a 10-acre site, and they have 2.5 acres or 2.78 acres out of the floodplain, and they need to bring some fill in to make that a buildable parcel. So if you would like to make a recommendation to assess that and think about that, I think that's something we'd need to run some numbers on, how many buildable parcels that might affect.
Commissioner Willie, I think there are a lot of unknowns there that we probably can't tackle tonight, but that might be a future work session to help us understand what the pros and cons might be of a move like that. Commissioners, the path forward that I'm seeing is that we have a staff recommendation for approval based on all the things that we've talked about and the the large amount of cleanup work that has happened on the site. And we have a lot more salvage yard type questions that are going to come before us, where we are asking for some cleanup and probably making some compromises to make sure that that happens. I don't think this will be the last one that feels a little bit like this. I am comfortable with A or B, knowing that the applicant would have to comply with what is appropriate for A or what is appropriate for B. If there's more of an interest in saying no storage in that portion of the filled floodplain until a FEMA map, I think I'm okay with that too. In terms of deferring for some future action, I think that that's what's been going on here for a long time. So I don't know that that gains anything unless the intention is just to punish.
Yeah, Commissioner Willie, this is Commissioner Kelly. I think after our discussion here and hearing from staff and sort of working through this, I'm fine with A, and the way it's written is really tricky because it sounds like we have an option, either A or B, but that's not really what it is. It is a condition that gives two options to the applicant, one that they might take advantage of in the short term and one that they might take advantage of in the long term. We're not used to seeing that kind of stuff, but appreciate the creativity. I think we have work to do here. I think Tanya makes a good point, and I think at this point I'm not happy with the with the staff recommendation, but understand this is probably the best of the worst opportunity.
I would entertain a motion, commissioners.
Make a motion to approve site plan SP 24-00031. I might have added one extra zero. To document the expansion of the property at 1723 East 1500 Road for approximately 801 acres to 16.5 acres, the addition of 2 concrete door aprons, the expanded exterior storage area, revised parking area, and the change of use based on the findings listed in the staff report and subject to the conditions listed in the staff report. Carl, do you need anything else, or is that good? Okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Aye. And I just want to state, I certainly appreciate the conversation, and I think there is some future work to be done. I'm not comfortable supporting this with where we're at, but look forward to some future conversations about how to mitigate something like this in the future. Okay, with that, this agenda item is concluded, and next we move on to 4.3. It looks like Carl is queuing up for that one. I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Carl Bauer, County Planner with the Zoning and Codes Department. This item was originally prepared by Mary, and again, unfortunately, she's not able to be here tonight, but this is something that I worked closely with her on, a text amendment to further clarify regulations on vacation rentals. So the proposed changes to the zoning code are, first, to establish standard conditions for vacation rentals, second, to develop an administrative process for vacation rentals, and third, to develop criteria to determine if a vacation rental can be processed administratively or if it requires a conditional use permit. Right now, zoning and code staff is aware of between 25 and 30 vacation rentals operating in the unincorporated area on an unpermitted basis. Right now, a vacation rental in the unincorporated area generally requires a conditional use permit to become permitted. These changes would establish an administrative process for that, while some more intense uses would require a conditional use permit. Part of the reason for these changes is because bringing forward 25 to 30 conditional use permits would not just overload staff, but it would overload this body as well with the number of conditional use permits coming forward. So some of the standard conditions found in these draft regulations are that nobody can own, operate, or register more than 3 vacation rentals at a time. That's a condition found in some other municipal and county regulations around the region and across the country. No more than 1 vacation rental is allowed within a single dwelling. Vacation rentals shall not cause a nuisance. They must have adequate ingress and egress on the adjacent road per the Public Works Department. There needs to be adequate parking on site, and parking can't take place within the roadway. They must have an operator or a property manager who's available to answer complaints or answer any issues that are brought up by a guest. They may not have activities that require a special event permit without first obtaining a special event permit. They must pass a life safety inspection by the building inspectors here in the Zoning and Codes Department, and they must comply with all applicable regulations. As far as a vacation rental that could be approved administratively, no more than 1 vacation rental would be proposed on an eligible parcel. The proposed vacation rental wouldn't have characteristics the Zoning and Codes Director would likely constitute a nuisance, and the applicant and the proposed vacation rental satisfy all of the other conditions and terms listed within the zoning code. For registration, the vacation rental would be required to register prior to commencing the use, and that registration would be valid for 2 years. The registration wouldn't be transferable to any other party, and it would expire upon transfer of ownership. And then a registration fee would be collected, and that amount would be set by a resolution of this body. For the process of registration, first it would start with a pre-application meeting between the applicant and zoning and code staff. They would send out a letter to neighbors within 1,000 feet. They would fill out an application. That would include a site plan showing the location of the vacation rental and indicating that there's adequate parking, sanitation facilities, and any other information that's requested. And then they'd also submit a copy of that notification letter, and if needed, an owner authorization form. The Director of Zoning and Codes would be able also to place conditions of approval or restrictions on the use of the vacation rental if necessary. And if any of those conditions were violated, the director would be able to suspend the registration until it's brought into compliance, or they may revoke the registration. And any appeals of that would be made to the county's Board of Zoning Appeals. So for some other changes to the zoning code, we're adding use-specific standards related to vacation rentals. There's a slight change to the definition of a vacation rental. We're changing the permitted use table to make vacation rentals a permitted use in addition to a conditional use. And we're also making a change to the accessory dwelling units section of the code that would allow an ADU to be used as a vacation rental after the 3-year time period where it's used by a family member or a farm worker has lapsed. There are certain criteria that are reviewed along with a text amendment application. These are listed here and as well as in the staff report. The Planning Commission considered this, this text amendment on March 25th. They voted to approve it with some very minor modifications, and that was a unanimous vote. And with that, I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Carl. This is Commissioner Reed. I'm curious how, so specifically the no more than 1 vacation rental proposed on an eligible parcel. How is a vacation rental defined? Example, like by separate building or separate listing on a website, for example?
So one potential example of having more than 1 vacation rental on a property is if you're renting out an entire house and you're also renting out an ADU on the property. So in a situation like that, a conditional use permit would be required.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Nope, then never mind, that answers it for me. Commissioner Kelly, I'm seeing no questions from him. Commissioner Willie, how about you?
Well, sure. This is Commissioner Willie. So similar to our last item, Carl, you said there are 25 to 30 of these are already operating. There is a process, like a CUP process, but they haven't used it. And so rather than try and bring each of them through that, we're looking at a different way to get them into compliance, right?
Correct. A more
Okay.
simplified and streamlined way to bring them into compliance.
Right. And that's the same process or similar process that the city looked at for their vacation rentals. They started with individual CUPs, got overwhelmed, and decided that there were some things that could be kind of standardized. So I think that's a good direction. This idea of we have things that aren't in compliance and that we work to get them into compliance as kind of a standard operating procedure. I just wanted to kind of mention that. It did have an appeal process. I was really glad to see that. So that appeal is to the BZA, which I originally thought maybe that would be an appeal to the Board of County Commissioners, but I guess the BZA is already handles similar things to that. So that seems all right by me. I had really, I thought it was pretty complete. I did have a question that's a little bit unrelated, so I will hold that until after public comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. All right, with no other questions from commissioners, we'll go ahead and open this item up for public comment. Oh, I'm sorry, applicant. Oh, no, we don't have an applicant on this one. This is me melding different agenda items. Sorry, y'all. Okay, public comment. Anybody here that would like to provide comments on this item? Seeing none. Double check for anybody online. Okay, seeing none. Thanks, Sarah. Close that. Thanks, everybody, for being patient with me. Bring it back for any further comments or motion.
Commissioner Willie, you had one more unrelated question. Is that what you said?
Marginally related, I guess I'd say. First, this had all the elements that I was looking for as I went through, and if I had a question, it was later answered in the same document or in Carl's presentation. So I think this is a really thorough work, and I think it's going to help us get some folks into compliance that are local entrepreneurs. So my unrelated question that is somewhat related is been having some conversations around the possibility of a soccer base camp locating in or near Lawrence, and that other communities, when they've absorbed something like that, when it's a large influx of people, have had a way to relax their regular rules around temporary rentals and things like that. So I just want to put it to staff if that's something that is in the thought process of, would there be a short-term change of rules in response to that? And is that something we should be thinking of ahead of time? I guess it's 2026 is when that's proposed.
Commissioner, I think we'd like to kind of take the lead from Lawrence Douglas County Planning if this is something that they recommend for the city, and which we don't know yet. So, but we can take that back to staff, and if we need to bring it back to you, we will.
Okay, if we can think about it ahead of time is better than if it comes upon us and we're stuck with a lot of people who are trying to do other things and we don't have a process for it. So that's all. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. I just want to say I agree with Commissioner Willie's comments. I think this was really thorough and answered all of my questions except for exactly how we define that, what is a rental. So I'm happy about this and hopeful to hear some progress from staff sort of later down the road about any unforeseen things in the process that become sticking points or stuff that you maybe just didn't think through. I'll be interested to hear if there's any amendments that you think need to be made to this process in the future, but otherwise hope that it's much more efficient and helpful for staff and for residents.
I would just add, I was happy to see in the regulations notice to neighbors, and just I know administrative staff will keep track of if we're getting a lot of comments on that maybe we need a more public process. But if we're only getting one or two, I'm not sure we need to have it as an agenda item every time we have a rental. So thanks for all the work on that. I'm going to make a motion to approve the text amendment TA 22-00145, revisiting the zoning and land use regulations for the unincorporated territory of Douglas County, Kansas, to develop standards and establish an administrative review process for vacation rentals as shown in the staff memo, and adopt resolution number 2408.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All those in favor? Did I hear?
Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Willie, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, I didn't hear Commissioner Willie either.
Sorry about that. Okay, that's a 3-0 for the record. All right, thank you so much, Carl. Commissioners, I would like to request a short break, if that's all right, before our next stretch of agenda items. So we will reconvene at 7. Yeah, let's just do 8 o'clock, because I'm afraid I have a different time than what's on other people's clocks. So 8 o'clock, thank you. 8 p.m. and we are, it is 8 p.m. and we are back on the record. Thank you everybody for that brief break, appreciate it. We are ready to move on to item 4.4, and I will turn it over to staff for presentation. Go ahead.
Thanks, Commissioners. Jake Broadbent, Management Analyst. Tonight I have the Senior and Disabled Veterans Property Tax Rebate Pilot Program. The goal of this program is to provide tax relief to seniors and disabled veterans on fixed income who have struggled in recent years with property valuation increases. This is similar to Johnson County's program, except for the fact that we're not using the average home value. Instead, we're using $350,000 to be consistent with the homestead program and also to streamline the back-end process. The max rebate amount will be $300, or the county portion of the property tax, whichever is less. Applications will be open from January 15th to April 15th of 2025, so it doesn't start until next year. And the email address for questions and submissions will be propertytaxrebate@dgcoks.gov. And I'm happy to stand for questions. We also have Chief Deputy County Clerk Marty Penrod here.
Thanks, Jake. I don't have any questions. I'm just really excited about this, but I think you did a really good job laying out clearly where we're at right now, and that there's more sort of process to be determined later on down the road. Commissioner Willie, I'm looking up at you. Any questions?
Just a little bit. I've also been really excited about this, and I know it's a pilot program. We'll kick it off and see kind of how that how that's reflected in the community. And Jake, when you mentioned that people can apply for it in the first part of 2025, but it is a refund off of taxes that they're paying currently in 2024, is that correct?
Well, they would need to be, Marnie, help me with tax years. I get confused.
So
You have to be on the mic, Marnie, sorry.
hi, Marnie Penrod in the County Clerk's Office. Yeah, if we start this rebate program in 2025, it would be rebating their 2024 tax bill, which is collected first half in December, and some people choose to pay it all, and second half is due in May. So some people do end up paying part of it in 2025, but it is actually the 2024 tax roll.
And Marnie, I just want to go ahead. I just want to make sure you said rebate their tax bill, and we have the newspaper, a portion of their tax bill, not their entire tax bill, right?
Correct.
Okay,
This is the county portion. And as Jake said, it would be the 300 or their county portion, whichever is.
Sorry, Commissioner Willie.
No, that was excellent. So folks would be paying their tax bill in December, and then they could apply for the refund if they qualify starting in that January. Would they need to, so if they want to apply for like for the full 300 and perhaps that needs to have paid like both the first half and the second half before it would get to that amount? Would they need to? I'm not saying this very well. I think I see Marnie nodding like she understands me though.
Yeah, I think I understand. You know, I don't think we got to that level of detail, and that's something we probably need to talk through as we flesh this out further. But yes, I think they would need to pay at least the 300 in order to be rebated that much, if that's the portion, the county portion of their tax bill met that. Did that answer where you were headed?
Yeah, and I think all this will flesh out as we get into it too. So if they pay their first half and maybe don't quite make that $300 portion for the county, and maybe that's not even an issue for taxes, I'm not sure. But then would they have to also have paid the second half to be able to qualify for like that full 300 if they hadn't met that threshold quite yet? And if not, could they apply twice?
I'm thinking about it while we're talking, and I think the deadline is April 15th. So we will know where they're at, because the deadline to pay your second half is after April 15th. It's May 10th, I think, off the top of my head. So we would know by the time they apply what situation they're in.
Okay, so it could be addressed either way.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have in our project plan to not send out payments until June. I think it says June or July, one of those. So it could also be after the second deadline.
Okay, that makes sense. I appreciate that. And how will we get the word out about this program? I know, Jake, you mentioned an email address and I did not write it down fast enough, but I think there'll be a lot of interest in the public.
So, Commissioner, one of the things we've talked about is obviously we're hoping we continue to get good press, and obviously we can promote it on our website, but this really is one of other property tax programs available to fixed income seniors and veterans. And so we've talked about including it with information related to those other programs, so folks can qualify for more than one program. The clerk's office and the treasurer's office are really good about this. When folks come to them with questions, they can suggest these kinds of things. And I think it'd be more than just this program. It'll be Homestead, it'll be other programs as well.
Thank you.
I just want to let commissioners know that if they approve the program today, then I will, when we get ready to prepare the 2025 budget, I will take this as indication that we want to set aside the funds for the pilot and include that in your proposed budget. And my recommendation will be to take that from fund balance for 2025. Since this is a pilot, we need to see how it goes. I think it's an appropriate one-time expense.
Thank you, Sarah, for spelling that out. And then beyond that, it seems we should expect to maybe have Jake and Marnie and maybe other staff back later in the year to tell us sort of what that fully flushed out process is and any additional details that were learned along the way before we launch it.
Yeah, that'd be great. And also just to get the promotion out again.
Yes, absolutely. Jake, did you have something you wanted to add before? I want to give you the chance to respond.
Yeah, we also talked about partnering with the Senior Resource Center to see if they could take some applications.
Good
Perfect,
job,
thank
Jake.
you. Yep, and Project Lively, that's another one. Cool. Any other questions from commissioners?
No questions.
All right, I'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. Anybody here wish to make comment on this item? Seeing no takers. Anybody online, Sarah? All right, public comment is closed. Bring it back for any further comments or a motion.
Commissioner Willie, I'm really excited about this, and I appreciate all of Jake's work and staff's work to pull this together. I know we kind of had Johnson County as a model, but you know, we always have to make something ours. So I'm really pleased with what's come before us, and I'm excited to get to communicate this in the public. I know it doesn't satisfy all of the things that we're hearing from, but I think it's responsive, and it gives us a chance to try this out and see where we go with it the following year.
Would you like to make a motion? I also can do that since I realize I've got it on paper right in front of me. So this is Commissioner Reed. I move to authorize an addendum to, oh, sorry, this is me jumping ahead to the next item. Sorry. Item 4.4, my apologies. I move to approve the creation of the Senior and Disabled Veteran Property Tax Rebate Pilot Program to start in 2025.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Great. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jake and Marnie. Have a good rest of your night. Now we'll move on to that next agenda item that I started to jump ahead to, our item 4.5, and I think Jill's going to give us an introduction to this.
Thank you, Commissioners. In your agenda item report, you've got some background on the proposed addendum to the FY 2024 service agreement with Artists Helping the Homeless. The county's had a partnership, a funding agreement with AHH since 2019 to provide respite and transitional housing at the two homes that I think y'all are very familiar with. In the time that AHH has been in Douglas County, they've become a true community partner beyond just those two homes. They're integrated with community members experiencing houselessness and those that have a history of it. And because of that, they've really established a trusted framework and relationships with our unhoused community. And that has led us to the point where we would like to expand the scope of service to allow them to serve in a peer outreach, homeless outreach support capacity. This is a unique opportunity that is, as I mentioned in the AIR, it is directly responsive to one of the strategies in our strategic plan to address homelessness in Douglas County, and that was to develop a multidisciplinary homelessness response team. The development of that team has been underway for a good amount of time and has happened through a series of really careful considerations and discussions with our different partners, starting with the Burt Nash Community Mental Health Center. They've been an integral partner in the development of that team and what that team should look like from the very beginning, because historically Burt Nash has been the leader of homeless outreach. They will continue to be play a role in this homelessness outreach team. And more information will be shared about what that full team is going to look like at future sessions. But one of the things that's mentioned in the AAR is that this new homelessness response team, which we're calling the HRT, it will be a countywide team, but it's going to be led by a staff member from the city of Lawrence. That's going to be a staff member from the Homelessness Solutions Division, which is led by Misty Bosch Hastings. And Misty's here tonight, and I want to just give her a quick moment to talk about where the HRT's at. It's timeline to launch later this month, and how the role that she's going to play in supervising that team lead in this partnership between the city and the county. Misty, do you want to come up and just provide just a quick update on the HRT and how the city's going to oversee that and how we'll work together? Push that green button.
Green button.
Sorry, yeah, the button turns it green. Push it again, sorry.
How about now? Okay. All right. So currently the process that we are in is developing MOUs with other partner agencies, hoping to have that wrapped up within the next couple of weeks. Would really like to see the team come together and start at the very beginning of May. Also, what we're in the process of is working with KU to develop training for outreach. We have purchased training from National Alliance to End Homelessness on outreach, and that we're meeting this week to kind of finalize what that's going to look like and who's going to be at the table for those trainings. So just getting everybody prepared right now to shift in this direction. We will be presenting everything at the May 7th commission meeting. What else am I?
City commission meeting, yeah. Yeah. This is one piece of a puzzle. We hope to provide more information, but the role of peers, it's huge. I think this organization appreciates that. I know Bob Transky was a part of a lot of these conversations as well, but
yeah, really grateful for Artists Helping Homeless, the first partners to be really excited about this and say yes. And they always are that way. So really grateful for them.
Yep. Thanks, Misty. And Dustin Moore and Russ Townsley are here from AHH. If there's questions, Dustin's our lead program manager here in Douglas County, and has really just made himself available to be a part of a lot of things, and he'll be a lead person in this work. So they're available for questions if folks have them.
Thanks, Jill, and thanks, Misty. I'm very hopeful about this, and I just want to make, it's not a question, but I just want to point out, it's sort of mentioned in our memo. I want to put a point on it, that this is an example of something that is moving the work forward and representative of work that has been very continuously happening and evolving and growing between the city and county and all of its community partners over time. And it mentions the A Place for Everyone plan, and that this is one tangible example of a service and an area of growth that we are trying to do in response to that plan. And that plan is very much a living in action thing. And to me, this is just a good example. I think we're going to keep seeing things like this, both, in just regular agenda items like this, but also obviously during the counties and the city's budget processes this summer. But I just wanted to put a point on that because I appreciate that, and that I think there's a lot of things that are kind of consistently happening and growing and evolving over time that don't always necessarily get a lot of public attention. So I'm appreciative that this is something really tangible where we see some growth happening in a positive direction. Commissioner Riley, I'm turning to you again. Do you have any questions of staff?
I really don't. I would kind of echo your comments, Commissioner Reed. I'm excited about the partnership and always have been, and excited to see it moving forward in new ways.
Great, thanks.
Commissioner Kelly, I want to express some appreciation for First Arches Helping the Homeless, who have really stepped up in our community to meet needs as they come forward. I think sometimes we forget that Artists Helping the Homeless didn't start in Douglas County. They came from another community here, and now they're becoming bigger and bigger in Douglas County, and soon we may forget that they were anywhere else but here. But I do think it sometimes there's a narrative out there that we can do the best we can with the people who we have here, and sometimes we need to look to other communities and people in other communities to come help us solve our biggest challenges. So I really appreciate Artists Helping the Homeless in that. And the second is I want to take a few minutes and just recognize the collaboration that's happening in this space and the work that Jill is doing and Misty is doing and that whole team. Sometimes I see it on my school district side in a little bit of a different way, but they're really working together and trying to identify where the needs are. And this is a shift of dollars. And I think that we need to recognize that as organizations, we have to figure out where our strengths are, and that it takes something to say, we need to move the money from this space to this space. That's not always easily done, and that shows how nicely they're working collaboratively to solve this problem.
I'd say what you're not seeing, a shared funding model between the city and the county and the partners that are involved. The city has an extensive funding agreement with Burt Nash for those mental health services and the case management. There'll be other funding partnerships that I'm sure may come into play at some point. But as you learn more about what this multidisciplinary model looks like, it's really exciting. It's also really hard as it relates to conversations around medical care and medical outreach. But there's some really cool things happening that we hope we can share with you all, with our partners, our health partners. And just yesterday, started talking to our partners at the Humane Society about what does outreach look like for the unhoused population and how we engage with them and their pets. So we're constantly evolving and thinking of ways that we can work with the partners that we have and the resources that we have available.
Yeah, I appreciate Commissioner Kelly and Jill, you putting a point on the fact that this is a shift in funding and moving money in a different direction, but all towards the same path, and that is a really important strategy and tool that I think this interdisciplinary team and multiple organizations that's been clear to me, and I'm excited that that's part of the framework to sort of constantly be assessing, is this the highest and best use of these dollars at this moment in this place, or can we shift them elsewhere and really make some progress on a goal because we've been able to shore something else up over here, or we've just learned new things, right? So that sort of nimbleness and to your point, Jill, the tough conversations that sometimes that involves to be able to address collaboratively on a community-wide scope where the highest and best use of those dollars is and when it is necessary to shift them from here to there to impact our community in a more positive way is just a really important and not easy process to go through. So I want to appreciate that part of it. Okay, anybody here for public comment on this item? Nope. All right, anybody online, Sarah? Okay, we'll close public comment. Any further comments from commissioners? Ready for a motion?
How about a motion? Motion to authorize the addendum to the fiscal year 2024 service agreement with Artists Helping the Homeless for $36,000 for a total ongoing commitment of $412,686.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you all for sticking with us. Have a good rest of your evening. Thanks for being here. Okay, we've got one last regular agenda item. I'm going to invite Mallory up and, or staff, do we have any introduction? We're just turning it over to Mallory. Show's yours.
She's like staff by now, right? Yeah.
Thank you. I will keep this brief. Thanks for having me here tonight. It's good to see everyone. I will provide kind of a big picture overview where we're headed the next couple of weeks when the legislature returns. I think we gave you our end of session report the day after they left town, so you have that. We will have an updated report for you probably midweek next week before they return, just to kind of remind you what all is still sitting out there. And then once they're completely gone and out of town for good, we'll send a final report. So with that, the regular session ended Saturday, April 6th. They will return Friday, April 26th, which is next Friday. They changed the schedule a bit, which is a little bit odd. They weren't supposed to come back for veto session until Monday, the 29th. They will now return Friday, the 26th, and they've already set sine die for Tuesday, April 30th. So what that means is they have to get everything done by Tuesday, April 30th. What that also means is that they will go home by the 30th, and anything that the governor chooses to veto after that, they can't do anything about. And so to me, what that suggests is really their greatest priority at this point is getting home and campaigning. So that probably bodes well for a few things for us that maybe do pass. And she ends up vetoing because they won't have a chance to come back and try to override her veto. So what next week will look like, the budget committees will come back on Thursday, and they will look at the latest updated state economic forecasts, and they will also look at any amendments that the governor wants to make to her budget based on those economic forecasts. So that's what will happen next Thursday. Conference committees will probably also meet on Thursday. I think they're going to want to try to get as much work as they can done on Thursday so that when the full legislature comes back on Friday, they can get to work. So outstanding issues for veto session, veto overrides, of course, and then several conference committee reports that have yet to pass one chamber or the other. Couple of issues that we've been following throughout the session that I know are of interest that will be addressed during veto session. The Good Samaritan Law, for one, that was one issue that surprisingly wasn't taken up during conference committee that last week of session, but we're pretty confident that they will pass that when they come back. The big question now, though, that everybody, that I'm sure you've read articles about, what is the governor going to do with the tax relief bill that was sent to her desk? So I would say that some people, most, myself included, believe that she will veto the bill, which presents some really interesting kind of policy implications, if you will, should she do that. But let's review very quickly what is in the tax bill. Eliminates the state sales tax on food by July 1st. It eliminates state income tax on Social Security. It eliminates the bottom tax bracket and then reduces the other two down to 5.55 and 5.15. And then it has increases in the standard deduction and personal exemptions. Two property tax provisions I would note. The first, it would increase the residential exemption from 40,000 to 100,000. It would also kind of lesser interest to you all. It would decrease the statewide 20 mil for schools down to 19.5. In this tax proposal, it would the legislature backfills that money with SGF. But so those are the two kind of major property tax provisions in the tax bill. It also, I would note, it abolishes LAVTR and the City and County Revenue Sharing Fund, which is really not a surprise to anybody. We knew that they were going to do that all along. I would note, if she vetoes this, a couple of things could happen. The legislature could tell the governor, fine, we've given you 3 tax proposals. Many of them passed unanimously, and you're telling us, no deal, we're going to walk away, and we'll tell our constituents when we campaign for them that we're not going to give you any tax relief. So that's option 1. Option 2 is they have 5 days to figure out a tax plan, which is probably what they're going to do. I would note on the residential exemption issue in particular, that has been a pretty steady, much like the sales tax on food elimination and the elimination of the Social Security income tax. I mean, that has been a pretty bipartisan priority all session. I think in some of the other proposals, it was increasing it from 40 to 80. So ultimately, whatever happens, I think we can count on some type of increase to the residential exemption. I would also note, so she has 10 days to veto a bill when it gets to her desk. The tax bill did not get to her desk until Monday. So, but she's going to have to do something before they come back. So I would imagine we see one way or another on that, possibly even before the end of the week, because she'll have the revenue estimates, I think, by tomorrow. A couple of other things that will be discussed during veto session, the plastic bag bill that we're very familiar with at this point. She vetoed that for, I think, third year in a row. That, as a reminder, has only passed the House 72 to 51, so that honestly, they may not even try to override it because they don't pick up 12 votes, in my opinion. I'm not sure they even override it in the Senate. It only had 24 votes in the Senate. She also vetoed an anti-gender affirming care bill, similar to proposals we've seen over the last couple of years. This would create a civil cause of action against physicians for providing gender affirming care. Couple of other things they have to get done during veto session is the $6.6 billion education budget. So that they came to an agreement very late on Saturday night, but the proposal did not run in either chamber. So that will probably pass with little fanfare, knock on wood, when they come back. Government competition and dark store, I just wanted to mention that briefly. That was something that fell apart in flames, if you will, that last night during session. They had paired up the government competition Genesis Health Club's piece with property tax relief for seniors and disabled vets, and quickly realized that was a grave mistake. So I personally think the damage has been done on that. If you watch the House debate on that, it was scathing from veterans in the caucus, and so they sent it back to committee where there could still be further work done on it, and they could very well separate out the property tax for veterans and disabled disabled veterans and seniors, and put the government competition in its own bill and try to run it. But I'm confident that she will veto that. And again, they're not coming back to deal with vetoes after the 30th. So that's where we are. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them.
I guess the only thing I'd add, commissioners, is if that property tax exemption bill passes, it's a significant tax cut to your budget. So we would have some real difficult conversations around that.
Do you have any estimates, Sarah?
Oh, we haven't gone that far yet. So, I mean, I know there's a fiscal note, but it was prepared for statewide, but to try to go through and, we could try to take every residential property and cut 60K off and see where we end up, but it's would be very, very difficult. I mean,
I would note too, on a similar note, if she does veto this tax bill and they have 5 days to kind of figure out what do we do next, I mean, that puts all issues back on the table. And I think it's fair to say we've avoided a lot of really problematic issues, including some of those really questionable constitutional amendments, one that would have capped property valuation increases at 4%, one that with the rolling average that also, I think, posed some problems. And again, I mean, I think we're really fortunate that the legislature said, let's hold off on those for this year. But I mean, given what could happen with a veto, those could be back on the table as well, in addition to some of this other stuff. So we will remain vigilant, but I'm hoping that we've managed to hold off on those for at least next year.
Mallory, is that an across the board exemption that would apply, or is it specific to, are there any, I guess, eligibility criteria for who would apply
For the residential,
for the
exemption,
residential?
it's an across the board.
It's across the board.
Yeah.
Okay, so regardless of property value, income, correlation, any of that. Okay.
Yep.
Commissioner Billy, do you have any questions for Mallory?
It's a little bit like drinking from a fire hose, but I appreciate the written report also. So no, I don't have any questions at the moment. Thank you.
Commissioner Kelly, any questions from you? All right, I don't have any other questions either, so we'll open this item up for public comment. Any takers, any public commenters in the building? No? On the Zoom? No? All right, bring it back for any further discussion. This is a reminder for anybody who might be listening with us. There's no action to be taken. This is informational only. And to Commissioner Billy's point, there is a much greater detailed report in our agenda for anybody who's interested. And otherwise, thanks for being here, Mallory. We'll look forward to your next report. Okay, that brings us to the end of our regular agenda. Next, we have appointments. I did not do my homework and double check my mail before tonight. I remember if we've got anything on the docket. Other commissioners, are you remembering anything or?
I don't think we're ready to make any
Okay.
right now.
Commissioner Willie, you agree? I don't see you unmuting, so you must be good with that. Okay, so we'll move on from appointments and do our commissioner and administrator miscellaneous. So we'll turn it over to Sarah for her memo.
Thank you, commissioners. In your memo, there's a lot of dates coming up. So want to remind everybody that next Tuesday is our first annual Douglas County Government Day event from 4 to 6:30 at the fairgrounds. We're real excited. A lot of staff have put a lot of effort into it, and we're excited for this opportunity. Also wanted to note that a new date was added to your schedule related to the USD 348 special bond election canvas for Thursday, May 23rd. It's an unusual date for a canvas, but because of the voting audit stuff, they asked for a Thursday. If you can't make it, they do kind of want to know pretty quickly if we're good. We can also, if you can't make that date, we can find a substitute for you. But I did want to check and make sure you guys were okay with that.
Sarah, I think I mentioned this before, but
yeah.
I will be out of town, so I will. There will need to be a substitute for
And
me.
I don't think I can do it either.
Okay.
It works for me. I'll be there.
I might see if we can find another date, or I'll just tell them we're going to have 2 substitutes and see where we're at. Okay.
Just for your awareness, I will be, I am out of town from May 19th until May 29th.
Apologize for not remembering that. And commissioners, just a reminder that, also attached, so Brad Eldridge put together some information related to the market condition adjustments that showed up differently on tax bills this year. I know commissioners have gotten some comment from the public about those, so I want to point your attention to those. And also that there's some communication from the International Association of Firefighters, Local 1596, that is also attached related to our ongoing negotiations with labor for LDCFM. And then commissioners, next week, we do have the work session on the wind regulations and but then there is no work session scheduled for May 1st. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Sarah. Any miscellaneous items from fellow commissioners?
Nope.
I see a no from Commissioner Willie. I don't have one either, so we are adjourned. Have a good night, everybody.